In a quiet town where evenings smell of comfort, a man vanishes without a trace. His car is found in a park, empty, soaked in blood, the door hanging wide open. No one knows what happened. But soon, the police start knocking on the doors of those closest to him. And a chain of events begins, where each step leads not to answers, but to deeper secrets. Familiar faces once trusted, bonds that seemed unbreakable, and shadows from the past rising at the most unexpected moment. This isn't just a disappearance. It's a game with higher stakes than anyone realizes, and no one knows who's really calling the shots. Sometimes, to uncover the truth, you have to ask just one question. Who lied first? Greetings, my dear viewer. Please, tell me which city and country you're watching this video from. Maybe you're watching me from a small town or a gigantic metropolis? Write about it. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and share this video with your friends. It will make me very happy. Let's get started. A crisp wind danced through the narrow streets, rustling the amber leaves that clung to the last light of day as it faded behind the skyline. The sky glowed with streaks of lavender and gold, painting the clouds with a fleeting warmth. Miles Everett stood motionless on the steps of his modest house, his gaze distant as he watched cars glide down the road. His neighborhood was the kind where children's laughter spilled over fences and the drone of lawnmowers signaled the day's end. But peace eluded him tonight. Something churned inside him, restless and unresolved. Professionally, Miles was respected. As a systems analyst at ABC Industries, he had earned a reputation for accuracy and strategic insight. His mind thrived on patterns, solutions, and control. Yet none of those skills could salvage what was slipping through his fingers at home. The once steadfast bond with his wife, Lena, had begun to fracture in ways he could no longer ignore. It had begun with barely noticeable changes, a shift in her voice, longer silences, late nights without explanation. At first, Miles dismissed it as ordinary strain from life's demands, but then came the moment that shattered his illusions. A few messages left open on Lena's phone, intimate and unmistakable, from Brandon Mitchell, his longtime friend, almost like family. The betrayal cut twice as deep. Unable to confront them outright without evidence, Miles turned to the tools he knew best. He set up discreet monitoring software and documented Lena's patterns meticulously. The truth unfolded in cold, undeniable data, hours logged at Brandon's address, frequent meetings that had no business being secret. His suspicions were confirmed, and the emotional fallout was swift and brutal. In the weeks that followed, Miles found himself oscillating between grief and fury. He buried himself in his job, clinging to its structure for a sense of normalcy. But coming home each night only served as a reminder of what had been lost. The familiarity of shared routines now felt hollow, meals eaten in silence, moments that once brought comfort, now laced with deception. Slowly, he began sketching out a new path forward, one that might leave everything behind. It was a frosty Saturday evening when Miles returned from a supposed business trip. The soft light from street lamps gave the town of Sharpsburg a quiet, almost nostalgic glow as he pulled into his driveway. He stepped out of the car, weighed down by a laptop, a briefcase, and a well-used duffel bag. The calm of the suburb was a stark contrast to the chaos that stirred inside him. Tonight, he would stop avoiding the inevitable. He let himself into the house without calling Lena's name. He already knew she wasn't there. Setting his bags by the couch and hanging his coat, he swapped his work attire for something more relaxed. The trip to Pittsburgh had been a lie. He had extended it not for work, but to delay facing the truth. He hadn't even packed a change of clothes for comfort, a small regret he noted as he showered away the exhaustion. After cleaning up, Miles sank into the couch with a beer and a newspaper. To a passerby, he might have looked like any man ending a long week. But behind his calm exterior brewed months of suppressed pain and unresolved anger. The stages of mourning had cycled endlessly, and tonight he felt something shift, something final. Past midnight, Miles began tidying up, drawing out each movement as if bracing for what came next. Eventually, he put on a light jacket, slipped quietly out the side door, and paused at his laptop to send one last email. Then, without a sound, he backed out of the garage and disappeared into the darkness, his intentions set in motion. The following morning, at 7:37 a.m., a frantic voice crackled through emergency dispatch. A woman had stumbled upon an abandoned vehicle in George Washington Park. The doors hung open, the headlights still on, and inside was a scene of chaos, blood spattered everywhere. No bodies, just disorder. Her voice trembled as she described what she saw, then cut the call short before more questions could be asked. Later that same day, Detective Philip Nolan made his way to the Everett residence. Lena looked stunned when told that Miles's car had been found in the park. She insisted he was still in Pittsburgh. But the license plate and registration left no doubt. It was indeed Miles's vehicle. She offered a theory. Perhaps the car had been stolen. Nolan wasn't satisfied with guesses. He pressed further, asking pointed questions. When Lena tried to call Miles, it was the detective who answered, his voice calm but direct. Miles's phone had been discovered inside the car and was now logged as evidence. Lena's confusion turned to dread. Nolan revealed that a bullet hole had been found in the vehicle. No sign of Miles. Panic set in. Lena called the Pittsburgh hotel where Miles usually stayed. When they confirmed he hadn't checked in, her worry deepened into full-blown fear. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on Miles's briefcase and laptop, still exactly where he had left them. The detective mentioned a search warrant would be needed for a full investigation. Lena, dazed, insisted that her husband wouldn't be caught up in anything criminal, but the pieces weren't adding up. As Nolan continued questioning, Lena's anxiety spiked. Why had Miles come home without notice? What had he done that night? The thought that something terrible might have happened to him became overwhelming. "You have to find him," she pleaded, tears brimming. Nolan's tone softened. "We don't know much yet, Mrs. Everett," he said. "There's no reason to assume he's done anything wrong." He advised her to make some coffee while his partner worked on the warrant. Lena nodded, her hands trembling as she moved toward the kitchen. But when Nolan explained they would need full statements from all involved, her fragile calm began to crumble again. They gathered around the kitchen table, each clutching a cup of coffee, as Nolan began recounting the evidence uncovered at the crime scene. A car abandoned in a public park, its frame pierced by a bullet, smeared with blood, and marked by unmistakable traces of a struggle. The vehicle had already been secured for forensic examination, and specialists continued to scour it for additional leads. Soon after, Detective Kessler arrived brandishing a search warrant, which set the forensic team in motion to methodically examine the house, garage, and the couple's second car. Nolan arranged for DNA samples from Miles's personal items, a razor and a toothbrush, to compare against the blood discovered at the scene. Overcome with anxiety, Lena was gently encouraged to wait in the living room while investigators worked through the property. When the search wrapped up, the team seized only 2 possessions, Miles's briefcase and his password-protected laptop. Nolan asked Lena if she knew how to access the computer. She offered a few possibilities, but none of her attempts unlocked the device. "Our tech specialists will handle it," Nolan assured her, keeping his tone even. He then requested a timeline of her activities over the weekend. Lena recounted her typical Saturday, completing chores around the house, a phone call from Miles around 1:30, a trip out shopping, dinner, and then staying overnight at a friend's home. By the end of her account, Lena's nerves were raw. As Nolan took down her statement, he told her they might need to return for more information. He also inquired if she had any recent photographs of Miles that could assist in their investigation. Lena fetched an album, from which Nolan selected 2 clear shots of Miles, Pointing to another man captured in one of the pictures, Nolan asked about his identity. Lena clarified that the man was Brandon Mitchell, Miles's best friend, not a family member. Nolan then joined the forensic team in the garage. There, while checking over Lena's car, they detected bloodstains on both the brake and gas pedals. Preliminary tests confirmed the blood was human, leading to the car's impoundment for further analysis. Nolan confided his growing suspicions about Lena to Kessler, particularly given the blood in her vehicle. Together, they returned to the house to update Lena on their findings. Lena met the news with shock, insisting she had no explanation for the blood and claiming she hadn't been anywhere near the park. She surrendered her shoes for examination without hesitation. As the detectives left, Nolan was unsettled, uncertain of Lena's innocence. Kessler probed, "Do you think she's telling the truth or just playing the role?" Nolan hesitated. "I'm not sure." The two agreed to expand their inquiry, planning to speak with neighbors, friends, and anyone else who might explain why Miles came home unexpectedly. Nolan hoped these lines of questioning would lead them closer to the truth. On the drive back to headquarters, both men reflected on the many unresolved questions, and the lab provided no fresh answers before their shift ended. Their list of uncertainties continued to grow. Early the next day, Philip and Derek arrived at the precinct, eager to make progress. They were greeted by a new batch of forensic reports and a medical examiner's summary. For an hour, they meticulously reviewed the results, realizing as they finished that more documents were still inbound. Glancing up from a report, Philip remarked, "Everything seems to be pointing the same way, but we can't afford to jump to conclusions. Let's hold off until the tech team finishes their work." Derek nodded in agreement. "Right. In the meantime, we should speak with his attorney and a few colleagues. We're not ready to bring anyone in, but we need formal statements before we loop in the DA." Around 9 o'clock, they visited Raymond Granger, Miles Everett's attorney. Granger quickly authenticated the emails obtained from Miles's laptop. Thanking him, the detectives proceeded to ABC Industries, where they met with Miles's supervisor. Kessler inquired whether Miles had planned to remain in Pittsburgh through Friday night, referencing the seminars he was scheduled to attend that weekend. The supervisor confirmed that Miles was expected back by Friday evening. When asked about Miles's recent demeanor, the supervisor admitted that Miles had seemed more withdrawn lately, but had assured him that all was well. With that, the detectives returned to the station. By late morning, initial DNA test results arrived, along with a curious item, a box filled with wires, accompanied by a forensic report. Digital maps from the tech team started tying the evidence together. The detectives spent the next several hours piecing together the details in an interrogation room at the station. Later that day, confident in their preparation, they opted to confront Lena Everett again. They arrived unannounced at her home, hoping to catch her off balance. Lena opened the door, immediately inquiring if there were updates about Miles. Nolan replied, "No news yet, but we do have some progress. We have a few more questions for you." Lena let them inside without hesitation. Once seated, Kessler pulled out his notebook. "Is there anything you'd like to tell us regarding your relationship with Brandon Mitchell?" he asked. Lena's face went pale. "What? Brandon is just Miles's closest friend," she stammered, visibly unsettled. Nolan pressed, "Is there anything romantic between you and Brandon?" She denied any romantic involvement, though her reaction hinted at underlying tension. The detectives rose, and Kessler stated, "We'll need you to come with us to the station to provide a formal statement." Lena's voice quivered. "Am I under arrest?" Nolan answered, "You're not being arrested, but we have reason to believe you haven't shared everything." Lena agreed to go with them. The drive to the station was silent. Once there, she was led into a deliberately unwelcoming interrogation room. Nolan asked again if she wanted a lawyer, but Lena, tearful, declined. As she settled into the chair, The team prepared the recording equipment. Kessler instructed his colleagues to check that both cameras were running, sensing that this moment might be pivotal. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a Crime Stoppers volunteer took a phone call offering up to $1,000 for information to crack the case. The investigation was gaining momentum, but what happened next would be entirely unforeseen. The volunteer paused as an elderly man's voice came through the receiver. "Is this where I call if I want to get paid for helping the police?" The volunteer spoke with steady assurance, making it clear that the value of the information would determine everything. "Can you provide details about an actual crime?" she inquired. The man hesitated, annoyance creeping into his voice. "So, I don't get paid right now? How do I know the police won't try to cheat me?" She offered him reassurance. "The money isn't coming from the police, so there's no deception involved. Just share what you know, and I'll give you a reference number. You can call back in a few days to check the status. If your tip leads anywhere, you'll be rewarded." The man's agitation grew. "I need the cash now," he demanded. She tried to help, saying, "If you're struggling, I can connect you with services for food or a place to sleep, but I can't give you money on the spot." "I'm not looking for a meal," he shot back. "I want grape juice." She couldn't help but laugh, replying, "Well, if your information is useful, you'll be able to buy all the grape juice you like." He proceeded to share his story. "I saw a guy toss a Colt handgun and 2 shovels into the river, right under the 3rd Street Bridge one Sunday morning. He was carrying a rifle. I was worried he might shoot me." The volunteer quickly wrote this down and asked, "Was this near the East Side parking lot?" He nodded. "Yeah, right off the dock. Should be simple to find," he added. The man was tall, had blonde hair, and was driving a dark blue vehicle. "I caught the beginning of the license plate. AZS. The rest I don't remember." She thanked him, provided him with a case number, and let him know he'd be paid if his lead checked out. Less than an hour later, divers pulled both the Colt and the shovels from the riverbed. By that afternoon, the evidence had reached the forensics lab, where testing showed that the Colt's bullets matched those from a recent shooting at George Washington Park. Forensics quickly alerted the investigating officers. Reviewing the developments, Detective Kessler recommended splitting their efforts. Kessler would interview Lena Everett, while Nolan would bring in Brandon Mitchell for questioning. Lena sat calmly as Kessler entered the interview room. He informed her the session would be recorded, then cut to the chase. "Are you involved with Brandon Mitchell?" After a moment, Lena nodded. "Yes," she admitted quietly. Kessler presented documents, emails and GPS data taken from her husband's computer that proved he'd known about her affair. Lena's composure faltered. "How did Miles find out?" she demanded. "How was he following me?" Kessler revealed that a GPS tracker had been placed in her vehicle, allowing Miles to record her every movement for weeks. "He's known for quite some time," Kessler said. She stared at him, stunned. "He never confronted us. I was with Brandon all night." Kessler presented more evidence, traces of Miles's blood on her shoes and inside her car. He elaborated, stating that forensic analysis confirmed the blood-matched samples from the crime scene at the park, and that a religious pendant belonging to Brandon Mitchell had also been discovered there. Lena forcefully denied any involvement. "Brandon had nothing to do with this," she insisted. "We never hurt Miles." Detective Kessler pressed her. "One of you needs to reveal where Miles's body is. If you cooperate now, it could help your situation later." Lena broke down, sobbing. "Miles isn't dead. I love him." She maintained that if anything happened to Miles, it was not deliberate. Tears streamed as she hid her face in a crumpled tissue. Kessler let the silence stretch before placing even more conclusive evidence before her. Once Lena regained some composure, he told her, "The medical examiner says survival is almost impossible. The volume of blood loss, along with no sign of treatment, means the chance of survival is less than 5%. He handed over the coroner's report and disturbing photos from the scene. Lena's sobs deepened at the sight. Kessler gathered the documents and gave her one last statement. Denying reality will only hurt you in the end. Meanwhile, Detective Nolan was arriving at Brandon Mitchell's residence. As he pulled up, a patrol unit joined him for support. Mitchell answered the door and agreed to accompany them for questioning. At the station, he at first denied any affair with Lena Everett, but eventually confessed after seeing the digital and surveillance evidence against him. Still, he swore he had nothing to do with Miles Everett's disappearance. In fact, Brandon suggested that Miles might have staged his own death to set them up. Nolan dismissed this claim. "We have the weapon used, and a witness saw you at the scene. Don't start making up stories." Brandon became defensive, explaining that he had always tried to avoid Miles dating back to high school and wanted nothing to do with any drama. He acknowledged the affair with Lena had developed gradually. Nolan pressed him. "Did things escalate when Miles turned up dead?" Brandon insisted he was uninvolved. "Lena and I didn't plan anything. If Miles wanted to leave, he had legal help. He wouldn't go this far," he argued. Nolan kept pushing. "We have enough evidence for a search warrant, for your house, your car, and your workplace. If you have something to confess, now's your chance. It could change things for you." Brandon stayed resolute, implying that if anyone went too far, it was Lena, not him. As Nolan left the room, he delivered one last warning. When two people are mixed up in a crime, one always tries to blame the other. As soon as Nolan entered the hallway, his partner appeared, wordlessly passing him a folder. The report confirmed it. The shovels pulled from the river were linked directly to Mitchell's landscaping company. Nolan let out a tense sigh, his face set in determination. Did they really believe we wouldn't track this back to them? Later that day, the detectives presented their evidence to the district attorney. Even though there was still no sign of a body, what they had was enough to justify pressing charges. Within the hour, both Lena and Brandon were officially accused of Miles's murder. The two listened in disbelief as officers read them their rights. Though they continued to protest their innocence, it was clear that events had slipped beyond their control. The outcome was now up to the legal system. After the arraignment, officers took them in for processing, fingerprints, photographs, and all. Brandon's expression was stony, unyielding, while Lena's face was streaked with tears. When they were finally returned to their separate cells, the silence between them broke. "What do we do now, Brandon?" Lena's voice trembled, barely more than a breath. She pressed on, her eyes wide with shock. "Do you really think they believe we killed Miles?" Brandon managed to remain steady. "We'll both need legal counsel, unless you'd rather share one. It might save money, since we're facing the same accusations." Lena shook her head adamantly. "This is madness. I swear Miles must have set this up somehow. Maybe he even paid someone to frame us, to leave evidence pointing right at us." Brandon stared, momentarily lost for words. "You really think he'd go to those lengths?" "Why wouldn't he?" Lena shot back. "You don't know him like I do. If I'd ever imagined he'd discover us, I wouldn't have gone near you." She faltered, tears welling up again. "But he was never violent. Not like this." "I'm surprised he didn't do something sooner," Brandon admitted, his composure slipping. "After he found out, I was bracing for some sort of explosion." Lena wiped at her face, voice wavering. "He never hinted he knew anything. Every time we saw each other, it felt secret, careful, almost too quiet. Maybe he wanted it to play out like this. Even if he's alive, he won't just move on. He'll want a divorce." Brandon didn't soften the truth. "You had to see this ending badly. The very first time you came to my place—" Lena interrupted, voice barely audible. "You're right. I wish he could forgive me." After a moment, she suggested contacting Raymond Granger, the attorney who had handled their previous affairs. Lena was taken to a room to make the call. When Granger answered, however, he explained that he couldn't help. He already represented Miles. Still, he recommended Benjamin Steele, an experienced criminal defense lawyer. Lena agreed immediately, and Steele was contacted. Benjamin arrived swiftly, dove into the case file, and then asked for their accounts. Lena, shaking, went first. "I haven't done anything wrong," she sobbed. "I love Miles. I could never hurt him." Steele turned to Brandon. "And your perspective?" Brandon spoke calmly. "We're innocent. Miles set this up. I believe he paid someone to make himself disappear, to frame us for whatever happened." After considering their statements, Steele nodded. "Our immediate priority is securing your release. The prosecution will likely set your bail at $100,000 apiece. Is that possible for either of you?" Lena blanched. $100,000? Steele reassured her. "You'd only need to post 10%, $1,000 for bail. The rest is only at risk if you flee or the judge orders otherwise. You'll have another hearing tomorrow morning. For now, you'll both have to remain here overnight." That evening offered no respite. The holding cells were chaotic, the food barely edible. Morning arrived with the noise of other detainees getting ready for court. The hearing was over quickly. Lena and Brandon both pleaded not guilty, and as expected, bail was set at $100,000. Brandon managed to arrange his portion and was released by late afternoon. Lena wasn't as fortunate. She checked her bank balance and found nothing. In desperation, she phoned her parents, who, after a strained conversation, reluctantly agreed to help. The delay meant Lena endured another night in custody, this time with two loud, intoxicated women who kept her from sleeping. By the following day, the funds finally secured her release. Returning home, Lena found the house empty and silent. She ignored her phone, heading straight for the shower before collapsing in bed, letting the answering machine handle every call that came in. The next several weeks blurred by. During this period, Lena discovered that Miles had withdrawn the entire balance of their joint bank account shortly before vanishing. Roughly 10 days earlier, he'd emailed Raymond Granger, explaining he was transferring the funds so Lena couldn't touch them during the impending divorce. The email didn't say where he planned to go, but confirmed he intended to relinquish his share as soon as the paperwork was complete. Meanwhile, Lena and Brandon met regularly with Benjamin Steele. After going through the prosecution's evidence and conferring with the district attorney, Steele grew convinced that the absence of a body and the circumstantial nature of the evidence could work in their favor. He suggested hiring a private investigator to look into whether Miles had orchestrated the entire situation. Lena, however, remained unconvinced. Deep down, she wondered if the truth was something else, perhaps a robbery that had spiraled or a carjacking gone wrong. Part of her desperately clung to the hope that Miles was still out there somewhere. Despite everything that had happened, she wasn't ready to mourn him. Not yet. The private investigator made little headway in the case. Acting on a tip from a vineyard owner who claimed to have seen weapons discarded, possibly connected to a murder, Benjamin directed the detective to investigate. However, the informant disappeared, and no tangible evidence was found. Though Benjamin never voiced it, a tension was building between Lena and Brandon. After Brandon's release, he subtly hinted that they were now free to be together without Miles in the picture. But Lena, overwhelmed with emotion, rejected him, accusing him of ruining everything. Brandon responded coldly, distant from her, and this pushed their relationship to the brink of collapse. A little more than a month later, Benjamin arranged a meeting with Jackson Burke, the district attorney, in hopes of getting the case dropped. Lena and Brandon, under mounting pressure from friends who kept asking questions, were eager to move forward with their lives. To their surprise, Burke, youthful and casually dressed for someone of his stature, offered a plea deal, 8 to 12 years for second-degree homicide. Shocked, both Lena and Brandon vehemently denied any involvement. Benjamin pressed Burke for further details, prompting the DA to disclose recent DNA findings. Blood matching Miles's had been found in Brandon's vehicle, and a piece of plastic recovered from the crime scene matched materials used in Brandon's landscaping work. Enraged, Lena lashed out at Brandon, but he denied all allegations, reminding her she was with him at the time of the incident. Benjamin intervened, urging both to stay calm. Burke continued, detailing the evidence. Miles had been shot, his body loaded into Brandon's vehicle, and later buried. Both defendants' DNA had been found at the scene, and multiple witnesses claimed to have seen Brandon discarding items tied to the crime. Despite the damning accusations, Lena and Brandon refused the plea deal, certain they could clear their names in court. Benjamin realized they faced a difficult battle ahead as they braced for trial. After their departure, he reviewed the evidence again, uncertain whether either of them was telling the full truth. Several months later, the trial began. Judge Cormack opened the session as Benjamin sat between Lena and Brandon, attempting to ease the tension between them. D.A. Burke began his opening statement. While Miles's body had yet to be discovered, Burke argued that the evidence clearly pointed to Lena and Brandon as the culprits. Emails showed that Miles had uncovered their affair and was preparing to divorce. Burke presented a theory that Miles was shot at Brandon's home during a confrontation and then transported to a secluded location to be disposed of. Forensic evidence, Miles's blood in Brandon's car and materials linked to the crime recovered through Crime Stoppers, tied the defendants to the scene. Overcome with emotion, Lena broke down, forcing Benjamin to calm her down before Burke could continue. The prosecutor also revealed traces of blood in Lena's vehicle, implying her direct involvement. He warned the jury that both defendants might attempt to blame each other. His opening remarks set a grim tone for the defense. Benjamin objected, reminding the jurors that guilt had yet to be established, but Burke's words had clearly made an impact, setting a challenging stage for the defense. The prosecution's first witness, a tech expert, testified about emails and GPS records revealing Lena's meetings with Brandon. Miles had used tracking software to monitor their locations and schedules. A journalist commented that the tracking company, Granite Ridge Surveillance, expected a surge in business from future clients. Throughout the testimony, Brandon appeared uninterested, while Lena appeared deeply ashamed. Benjamin found it difficult to challenge the tracking data, and the session was adjourned for lunch. The afternoon brought testimony from first responders and officers who recounted finding Miles's abandoned car. Then came the detectives and the medical examiner, who provided graphic details, including photos of bullet wounds, blood pools, and drag marks. The examiner confirmed Miles had lost around 4 pints of blood and likely had a major artery severed. This led to a chilling conclusion. Miles had been gravely injured, possibly dying, when moved. Lena cried out in disbelief, exclaiming, "Miles can't be dead," and was excused from the courtroom due to her emotional breakdown. The second day resumed with more testimony from the medical examiner, who elaborated on the blood tests. During cross-examination, Benjamin suggested that had medical assistance arrived sooner, Miles might have survived. The examiner admitted it was a possibility, though not likely. A forensic ballistics expert took the stand next, confirming that military-grade full metal jacket bullets had been recovered from the scene. Benjamin inquired if the bullets had passed through bone or soft tissue, but the technician pointed out the absence of residue. The weapon used, a Colt, was untraceable, and no fingerprints or DNA connected it to either defendant. A small but significant victory for the defense. The expert also discussed 2 shovels bearing Brandon's landscaping company logo, recovered from a nearby river. While no usable prints or DNA were found, the link to Brandon's business was undeniable. Benjamin suggested the blood in Brandon's car might have been planted, and the technician acknowledged that this theory couldn't be ruled out. However, the blood evidence found in Lena's vehicle, and a spot on her shoe, proved harder to challenge. Benjamin attempted to argue cross-contamination or secondary transfer, but the prosecution's case continued to grow stronger. Journalists predicted a tough battle ahead for the defense, especially with the mounting evidence against Lena and Brandon. Benjamin remained focused on casting doubt on the final moments of Miles's life, hoping to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jury. The defense began presenting their case with Dr. Warren, a blood pattern analyst. Asked to address the medical examiner's findings, Warren argued that the blood at the scene could have been the result of as little as 1.5 pints of blood loss. He also suggested that someone losing that amount of blood could still survive. The prosecution opted not to cross-examine him. Brandon then took the stand, adamantly declaring his innocence. He even suggested that Miles had staged his own death to frame them. Brandon denied ever owning a Colt and theorized that the shovels found in the river had been stolen from his company's storage yard. During cross-examination, Brandon recounted a past altercation with Miles, but struggled to provide any compelling reasoning for why Miles would have orchestrated his own death. The prosecutor subtly hinted that Brandon might have narcissistic traits, a comment that clearly unsettled him. In response, Steele quickly objected, prompting the judge to instruct the jury to disregard the insinuation. Shortly after, Lena Everett took the stand. She denied any involvement in her husband's death, expressing her love for him and suggesting that he might have been the victim of a carjacking. However, when asked about her whereabouts from late Saturday night to Sunday afternoon, she nervously recounted her time spent with Brandon, including intimate moments, which left her visibly embarrassed. The prosecutor seized on this to question her sincerity, implying that her actions contradicted her professed feelings for her husband. Lena, becoming emotional, struggled to maintain composure, prompting the judge to cut her testimony short. Later, in a private meeting, defense attorney Benjamin Steele expressed concern about the trial's direction, noting that both his clients had faltered in their testimonies. With no more witnesses to call, the defense rested, and closing arguments began. The prosecutor emphasized the lack of solid explanations from the defendants, while Steele argued that the evidence was largely circumstantial, pointing out the missing body and the possibility that Miles could still be alive. By 4:00 p.m., the jury began deliberating. The following afternoon, the verdict was delivered. Lena and Brandon waited anxiously in Steele's office. At 3:30 p.m., the call came. Both were found guilty of second-degree murder. Lena broke down in tears, while Brandon pounded the table in frustration. They were immediately taken into custody. Before being escorted away, Lena tearfully said goodbye to her parents, maintaining her innocence. They were informed that sentencing would occur the following week. The day ended heavy with sorrow. Over the next 7 days, time dragged on. Lena's parents visited her daily, while Brandon, with no immediate family, received a solitary visit from a distant cousin. The days felt long and oppressive for him as the gravity of his situation sank in. Lena, emotionally distant, refused to discuss the future despite her parents' attempts to comfort her. When sentencing day arrived, the proceedings were swift. Both defendants were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 15 years to life. Benjamin Steele, their attorney, expressed sympathy and assured them that he would review the case for possible grounds for an appeal. The days following the sentencing moved quickly. Within 72 hours, both Lena and Brandon were transferred to state correctional facilities. Lena was sent to a reputable women's institution, while Brandon was placed in a notoriously violent prison known for frequent riots. Public interest in the case waned as news stories dominated the news cycle. A few months later, Benjamin met prosecutor Jackson Burke for drinks. "You really went after them," Benjamin remarked, referring to the intensity of the trial. Jackson took a sip of his drink and replied, "Honestly, I didn't expect the jury to convict. They stuck to their guns, but something didn't sit right with them. I try not to take it personally." Benjamin nodded. "Maybe you're right. Still, this one stays with me." Nearly a year later, an article caught Benjamin's attention. Brandon Mitchell had been stabbed during a prison riot and was in critical condition. The news stirred something within him, drawing his thoughts back to the case. It had been 18 months since the trial's conclusion. Despite reviewing the case multiple times, Benjamin hadn't found any solid legal grounds to pursue an appeal. On a quiet Wednesday, a receptionist at the New York office of the Innocence Project received an unusual package. Inside, there was a DVD, a sealed biohazard-marked bag, and a detailed letter. As she read, her expression changed from confusion to growing concern. Finishing the letter, she immediately picked up the phone and dialed. "Travis, we just got something that I think the whole team needs to see." Moments later, a tall, lanky redhead in a white button-down shirt and faded jeans emerged from a nearby office. He thanked her for the package, took it, and returned to his desk. His name was Travis Keene, a recent law school graduate who had deferred a lucrative corporate law job to do a year of service work. At the Innocence Project, he primarily assisted senior lawyers with legal research. Although he hadn't planned on staying long, the work had grown deeply significant to him. Settling into his chair, Travis carefully unpacked the items, placing the letter, DVD, and bag in front of him. With his sneakers perched on the corner of the desk, he leaned back and began reading the letter. The letter was neatly typed in a professional font, quickly capturing his attention. It began, "Innocence Project, New York, Re. Convictions of Lena Everett and Brandon Mitchell." I'm not sure how to begin, so I'll start from the top. Hopefully, I can explain things clearly. My name isn't important, but the information I'm about to share could change everything for 2 people wrongly convicted, and for 5 others, including myself. This all started about 15 months ago, the day a man responded to an ad I had posted seeking help for my small IT business. I needed someone with strong technical skills. After a brief conversation, it was clear that he was more knowledgeable about systems and networks than I was. I hired him that same day. I'll call him Miles. In just a short span of 2 months, my business saw a remarkable rise, growing by at least 50%, thanks to Miles's tireless dedication, insightful mentorship, and the countless hours he devoted. When Miles first joined the team, he mentioned that he was new to the area and hadn't yet found a place to stay. At that time, my business was still in its early stages, and I had been toying with the idea of renting out the basement of our home for some extra income. My intention was to reinvest every dollar I earned back into the business, hoping it would eventually support both me and my young son. The decision to rent the basement to Miles was a bit of a leap of faith, but there was something about him that made me feel confident in the choice. We quickly settled into a routine, one that still persists today, although the nature of our relationship has evolved. For the first few months, Miles lived in the basement, sharing meals with us and commuting to work alongside the rest of us. In the beginning, he would often return to the office after hours, working without asking for extra pay. He explained that he preferred to stay occupied rather than waste time watching TV or sleeping. Over time, our professional relationship transformed into a true friendship, and eventually, it blossomed into a deep, affectionate bond that felt more like family. Now my son calls him Dad, and it feels entirely natural. From the beginning, I could tell something was bothering Miles. His quiet nature and tendency to get lost in thoughts I couldn't quite understand eventually led to a kind of unspoken tension between us. One calm afternoon at the office, I locked the door and called him in, determined to get to the bottom of what was troubling him. By then, I had realized just how strong my feelings for him had become. After some gentle encouragement, Miles finally opened up to me. He revealed that he was running from a painful marriage that had completely broken him. His wife had been unfaithful with one of his closest friends, and the betrayal had crushed him to such an extent that he had contemplated both homicide and suicide. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, sharing our personal stories of betrayal. My own husband had left me for another woman, and Miles had ended his marriage because of his wife's affair. This shared experience seemed to offer Miles some solace as he began to heal from such a difficult chapter in his life. That conversation marked the turning point in our emotional connection. We started spending time together on weekends, keeping our professional relationship intact during the week while exploring our romantic feelings on Saturdays. After about a month, it became clear that it no longer made sense for Miles to continue living in the basement, so he moved into my bedroom. From that point on, we became a true family, though there was still a nagging sense that Miles was hiding something from me. As our relationship deepened, I became more sure of my love for him, and I believe he feels the same for both me and my son. In fact, I should say our son, because that is how Miles refers to him. Our son is nearly 4 now and deserves the love of a father, something his biological father has not provided. He hasn't seen his real father in years. This brings us to just a few days ago, when Miles collapsed at work. After spending 3 days in the ICU, the doctors concluded that his condition was heart-related, likely due to a congenital issue, and he would need open-heart surgery. Once his condition stabilized, they moved him to a private room, and that was when we finally had the chance to talk. The moment I entered his room, I could tell something was deeply troubling him. That was when he shared a story with me that he feared would die with him if he didn't have the surgery. He needed to put that part of his life behind him for good. He spent the entire day recounting the story, and once I promised to write it down and ensure it reached you, it seemed as though a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Now, he is resting, and I am sitting beside him, typing this on my laptop while our son sleeps beside him. I believe I have most of the night to finish this letter. I still need to go home to prepare a DVD, which I'll explain later, and gather a few other things before I can send this off. I aim to have everything ready by noon tomorrow, but I also need to figure out how to send it anonymously so it can't be traced back to us. The story Miles shared with me, which I now consider to be my husband's story, began nearly 2 years ago. At that time, he was happily married to Lena, and their marriage was approaching its 6th year. One evening, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he noticed a small bruise on the side of her right breast. Initially, he assumed it was from an accidental bump, perhaps from something at home or from her part-time job as a secretary. But as he lay awake that night, he realized it looked more like a love bite than a bruise, and he knew it wasn't from him. That thought troubled him all night, and by the next day, it still lingered in his mind. He convinced himself he was being overly suspicious. After all, there was no concrete evidence, just circumstantial signs. Later that day, the manager of the parts department came to his office with a new tracking device for a trial run. The manager asked Miles to evaluate the device and provide feedback. Miles was left with the device, software, and instructions on how to use it. He quickly devised a plan to test it. 3 days later, after installing the device in his wife's car, Miles checked the monitor to make sure it was working. She had told him she was going shopping that afternoon, but the device showed her car leaving the house and heading directly to Brandon Mitchell's home, his best friend's house. An hour later, when he checked again, her car was still there. Feeling uneasy, Miles called her cell phone. She claimed she was out shopping, but he knew something wasn't right. That evening, he casually asked her about her day, and she stuck to the story about going shopping. Miles told me he felt physically ill, but he chose not to jump to conclusions just yet. He decided to watch her closely for a week while he was away on a business trip. Miles managed to track her vehicle across 3 states. After she spent hours at Brandon's place, starting from 8 p.m. and staying until 2 a.m., Miles confronted her the next day. She insisted she had been home the entire time, but it was in that moment that the truth hit him like a battering ram, and it shattered him. Once he returned from his trip, revenge consumed his every thought. While he had always known Brandon was a notorious womanizer, he never imagined his own friend would go after his wife. Later that evening, Miles went to the elderly widow next door, pretending he needed to borrow a wrench from her late husband's toolbox. He was aware that the old man had a revolver hidden at the bottom of the toolbox, something he had once been shown. Instead of taking the wrench, Miles grabbed the Colt revolver. He later confided in me that his plan was to kill both Lena and Brandon and then take his own life. He had decided to wait until their next meeting, which would happen while he was away. To monitor his wife's movements, Miles bought a tracking device, planning to return the one he had borrowed. Fortunately, Lena and Brandon didn't meet again for a week. If they had, my son and I might never have seen Miles again. During that week, Miles devised a new plan. He would frame Lena and Brandon for a murder. He spent the following week carefully constructing the details and another week gathering all the materials needed to execute it. Once everything was in place, he left for a business trip, confident that Lena and Brandon would meet while he was gone. Once he confirmed that Lena was on her way to Brandon's, he set his plan in motion. He created a paper trail suggesting that he was in the process of divorcing her. The final touch was an email to his lawyer implicating both Lena and Brandon, though he almost forgot to send it, a mistake that could have ruined everything. Before departing, Miles used the neighbor's revolver to fire into the passenger seat of his own car and a wooden block he had set up. He explained that the sound was muffled by an old blanket in the enclosed garage, but pulling the trigger brought him a sense of satisfaction. It felt like he was finally taking the first step toward his revenge. He even suggested that I look up old newspaper articles and obtain court transcripts, as he had followed the trial daily online. According to him, the reporters had captured every detail. As he recounted his actions, the events felt like an ongoing story. Miles didn't want to break the flow, so some minor details may have been left out. He also asked me to gather all the documents, believing it would help clarify everything. Miles had parked his car in a secluded spot near Brandon's house, preparing for the next phase of his plan. He opened a large gym bag filled with the items he had collected, spreading them out on a picnic table and covering everything with an old blanket. He began by arranging firewood, plastic sheeting, and a spare tire on the plastic, creating a path leading to the paved road. After returning the tire to the trunk, he scattered the firewood around the picnic area and removed the plastic. He worked quietly, using a small flashlight to avoid attracting attention. Once everything was set, he waited to see if anyone would show up. While waiting, Miles mentioned that he inserted a needle into his left hand to draw blood. He explained that he had bought everything he needed from a medical supply store, claiming it was for his elderly mother. He used a makeshift plastic bag to collect nearly 2 pints of blood, worried about clotting before he could dilute it with distilled water. It took over an hour, during which he mixed the blood with water. Miles used the mixture to create a pattern on the ground, hoping to simulate arterial spray, and smeared the rest on the car seat and ground to suggest heavy blood loss. He even filled the bullet hole in the firewood and the one in the car seat upholstery with blood. "I hope I'm getting it all right," he said, his voice calm but weary. "I don't feel like waking him up to double-check. He needs to rest for his surgery tomorrow." He paused before continuing, carefully choosing his words. "I pray everything goes according to plan, even if I haven't got every detail perfect," he added. "I still need to make the DVD for you." Miles had taken photos of everything, before and after, with his digital camera. "There are even pictures of me drawing my own blood," he said. Though he hadn't seen them yet, Miles had given me a password to access the files on their work server. He referred to the pictures as his souvenirs, noting that despite the dim light, the images had turned out surprisingly well. After finishing with the blood and car in the park, he packed up his gym bag and left. He had already purchased an old car for this purpose, and despite feeling faint from blood loss, he made his way to it. "I nearly passed out," he confessed. "I had to rest in the car until almost 6 in the morning before heading to Brandon's to finish what I started." To his surprise, Lena's car was still there and unlocked. "That was pure luck," he said, managing to drip a few drops of blood onto the gas pedal. As he approached Brandon's car, he saw a light on in Brandon's bedroom, which made him panic. "I thought they might have seen me." Quickly, he smeared more blood on Brandon's car and then sped off, driving to a payphone across the park. At dawn, he used the payphone to call emergency services, reporting a car in the park. To disguise his voice, he used a voice changer device he had bought from a spy store in Pittsburgh. It worked really well, he said, explaining that he could alter the pitch and tone enough to make it sound like a woman's voice. After that, he went to a dock by the river, where he threw 2 shovels and the revolver into the water. By the time I finished everything, I was completely drained, he admitted. Up until that moment, I was overcome with a surge of exhilaration, realizing that everything was unfolding precisely according to plan. He had arranged for a room at a nearby motel, aiming to stay out of sight and rest. Over the course of the following 2 days, he dedicated himself to recovery, resting, taking supplements, and consuming energy bars to regain his strength. His memory of the timeline, however, became somewhat hazy, he admitted. But at one point, I used the voice changer again and placed another call, this time pretending to be an elderly man who had helped the police trace the revolver I had discarded. After a brief silence, he added, "I'll go over this with him tomorrow and fix any mistakes." His hope was that once he saw everything settled, it would bring him a sense of calm. The reason he asked me to send this to you was to sever all ties to his previous identity as Miles Everett. He explained that Miles had adopted this new persona before meeting them, and he never wished to return to being Miles Everett. Specifically, he requested that you do everything possible to help overturn the convictions of Lena Everett and Brandon Mitchell. The next day, he planned to retrieve a copy of the New York Times and an inkwell. Using part of the front page, he intended to leave a clear imprint of Miles's fingerprints and create a large blood stain with a needle. When compared to the DNA from the park, this would prove that Miles was still alive. That should be enough to get them out, he added. The letter ended there, but there was a handwritten note at the bottom. Miles came through surgery just fine. He wants me to fly to Seattle tomorrow and send this package. I hate leaving him, but I know he'll feel better once it's on its way. I told you this situation would affect all 5 of us, he continued, but I don't think I fully explained what I meant. He and Miles were expecting twins in 3 months. Travis Keene flipped to the next page, expecting to find more notes, but the page was blank. He then examined the other contents of the package. The DVD was labeled Photos Taken in George Washington Park, and the envelope was marked Fingerprints and DNA. After reviewing everything, he called one of the senior attorneys. This was beyond his capacity to manage alone. It didn't take long to verify that the DNA belonged to Miles Everett. The fingerprints found in his car at the park further confirmed his survival, providing undeniable proof that Lena and Brandon had been wrongly convicted of a crime that never occurred. The state attorney general and governor moved swiftly to secure their release. A week later, they found themselves back in court, facing a completely new reality. The state attorney general issued a public apology to the court system, acknowledging the errors made and clarifying that the blame lay squarely with Miles Everett. While the judicial system had followed its procedures, it had been derailed by Miles's relentless actions. He also made it clear that their department would do everything in its power to locate Miles Everett and hold him responsible for the costs incurred by the state. Forensics, litigation, and prison time would all factor into the efforts to recover those costs. When a reporter inquired if they had any leads on Miles Everett's whereabouts, the attorney simply shook his head. Brandon Mitchell, however, appeared to have undergone a change. Gone was the arrogant man he had once been. Brandon now seemed more willing to find common ground. He expressed regret to Lena for his role in setting off the chain of events that led to their imprisonment. Lena, however, showed little interest in his apology, accepting the settlement check with a detached air, as if it were of no consequence. "I think we earned this," she said, slipping the check into her purse. "But I've lost Miles forever." 2 weeks after a cable news segment about Lena and Brandon's release, a large envelope arrived at attorney Benjamin Steele's office. Inside was a brief note and a sealed letter addressed to Lena Everett. Steele scheduled a meeting to deliver it personally. At exactly 5 p.m., he arrived at Lena's apartment. After a short exchange, he left her standing at the door with the envelope in hand. Hesitant, she carried it to the kitchen and opened it. Inside, she found Miles's familiar handwriting. Unable to resist, she began to read. Lena, I want to apologize for the time you spent in jail. I've never been one to seek revenge, but your betrayal, along with Brandon's, nearly destroyed me. My new life has taught me that I had to free you both to move forward. I know the authorities will be looking for me, but I'm confident in the new life I've built with my family. Goodbye, and good luck. M. The letter slipped from her hands, falling to the floor. In that moment, any hope of reconciliation with Miles vanished forever. The months following Lena and Brandon's release were spent trying to adapt to life outside of prison, each grappling with the damage caused by Miles's complex scheme. Lena returned to her family, attempting to rebuild what was left of her life, but she remained haunted by the letter Miles had left behind. His new life, free from the chaos he had engineered, felt like a cruel taunt to the suffering she had endured. Brandon, on the other hand, disappeared from the public eye. Rumors circulated that he had moved out of state, distancing himself from the community that had once condemned him as a butcher. Some speculated that he sought redemption, while others believed he simply wanted to escape Miles Everett's shadow. Meanwhile, Miles, or the man he had become, quietly lived with his new family, cherishing the life he had painstakingly rebuilt from the wreckage of his past. His actions had forever altered the lives of those he left behind, but to him, the sacrifices were essential for his freedom and peace of mind. As the years passed, the story faded from the public's attention, reduced to mere whispers in the corners of Sharpsburg. For Lena, Brandon, and Miles, the scars remained, silent reminders of how love, betrayal, and revenge can intertwine to create a storm that irrevocably changes lives. That's all for now. Or is it? Another incredible story is lined up for you next. Let's jump in. It's remarkable how the entire fabric of your life can unravel in less than 15 seconds. For me, that was all it took, ripping open an envelope, unfolding a bank statement, and realizing that my wife of 25 years had quietly drained our retirement funds. In 14 seconds, decades of trust were reduced to nothing. In that instant, the woman I thought I knew, the one I had shared my bed with for years, became a stranger. I can still see the image of that statement in my mind, the numbers blurring as my hands trembled. $300,000, gone. And that was just from one account. My name is Mark Reynolds. 3 months ago, I was a respected logistics manager, looking forward to a peaceful early retirement. Now I find myself sitting across a kitchen table from the woman whose life has become intertwined with that of my wife's lover, working together to bring down the people who tried to destroy us. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I did it, Laura. I actually did it. The words spilled out in a rush as I entered the house that Friday evening, March 15th, the notorious Ides of March. Even now, the irony isn't lost on me. Laura looked up from her tablet, her reading glasses slipping down her nose. At 53, she was still as captivating as ever, her ash-blonde hair perfectly colored to hide the gray, her body sculpted, likely from hours spent at the gym. After 25 years together, she could still make my heart skip a beat. "Did what?" she asked, putting her tablet aside. I loosened my tie, flopped onto the leather sofa, and grinned like an excited schoolboy. "I turned in my retirement papers. Thompson gave me the green light this morning." Laura's expression shifted, just for a moment, before she masked it with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At the time, I assumed she was just surprised. That's fantastic, Mark," she replied. "I thought you were going to wait until the end of the year?" she asked. I shook my head, unable to contain my excitement. "The company's offering an early retirement bonus. If I sign up now, we get an extra 100,000 in the savings. It's a no-brainer." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We can finally do it, Laura. All those trips we've talked about for years. Paris in the spring, the Mediterranean cruise, the Amalfi Coast. I rambled on, all of our long-deferred dreams suddenly within reach. But Laura barely responded to my touch. "It just seems sudden," she said. "I know," I said. "But why wait? We've spent our whole lives saving for this. 2.5 decades of careful planning, choosing security over indulgence, sacrificing short-term comforts for the long-term goal." I pulled her closer and spoke softly. "It's our time now, Laura. Just the two of us, finally seeing the world together." She offered another smile, but there was something in her eyes that made me pause. There was caution there, maybe even calculation. But she leaned in and kissed me, and I let my doubts slip away. "Let's celebrate," she said, her voice warm, a warmth I mistook for love. "I'll see if La Maison has a table for us." That evening, we shared an expensive bottle of champagne and began planning what was supposed to be our future. Well, I planned. Laura nodded along, offering little input, her attention drifting to her phone, excusing herself 3 times during the meal, disappearing to the restroom before dessert. That night would be the last true moment of joy in our marriage. If Laura had been more watchful, I might never have learned the truth. But complacency breeds mistakes, and after years of slipping under the radar, Laura let her guard down. It all started with a letter, an envelope from a bank I'd never heard of, addressed to her and marked confidential. It must have gotten lost behind the mail sorter, and I found it while cleaning up. At the time, I wasn't suspicious. I just placed it with her other mail, but something about that letter gnawed at me. We had always managed our finances together. Why would Laura have dealings with a bank I didn't know? "Oh, just an old account from before we got married," she explained when I asked casually. "I keep meaning to close it. Paperwork, you know how it is." I accepted her explanation and dropped it. But that night, lying next to her, listening to her steady breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more she hadn't told me. The next day, I checked our joint accounts. Everything seemed normal, but on a hunch, I started going through our tax returns from the last few years. Again, nothing seemed off. But as I scrolled through the files, one thing caught my eye. Our reported investment income had been declining, even though the markets had been booming. That's when I started digging deeper. I took a day off work, didn't mention it to Laura, and spent the morning calling the investment firms we used, requesting current statements for accounts I knew about. Then I visited the bank, where we kept our safe deposit box, where we stored our important documents. That's when I uncovered my first undeniable piece of evidence: statements from an offshore account in Laura's name, registered in the Cayman Islands, going back 5 years, showing large, consistent deposits. My hands trembled as I took photos of each page. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. At home, while Laura was supposedly at Pilates, I searched her office. Inside a locked drawer, its key hidden in a hollowed-out book, I found even more evidence: additional account statements, more offshore holdings, and something else: receipts for a luxury downtown condo, purchased 3 years ago, not in our names, but in hers, and the name Ryan Williams. That night, surrounded by piles of evidence on our bed, I did the math. Nearly $2 million had been siphoned from our retirement funds and investments over 6 years. Almost half of everything we had built together. A sinking, nauseating feeling twisted in my stomach. 25 years of homemade meals, delayed pleasures, and making careful, practical choices, always picking the sensible over the lavish, had suddenly turned into a cruel joke. The long-awaited trips we had promised ourselves someday had always been put off, but never fully discarded. Now it was clear, it had all been a lie. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, something cold and methodical stirred within me, an unfamiliar side that rarely showed itself. The person before me, who wore the face of my wife, had been deceiving me all along. I needed to know everything before I made a move. So, I hired a private investigator. His name was Eric Donovan, a former police officer who had made a second career out of uncovering infidelity. He charged a daily rate, plus expenses, and earned every penny. After a week of surveillance, he laid it all out for me, pushing a stack of photographs across the table. It was textbook, he explained. An older, wealthier spouse, a younger lover, and a pattern of financial manipulation. I stared at the images, my throat tight with anxiety. There was Laura, my Laura, walking into a fancy high-rise. Laura laughing across a table at a posh restaurant I'd never even heard of. Laura kissing a man who appeared at least 15 years younger than her, fit, tanned, the type who likely spent more time at the gym than reading a book. Donovan filled in the details. The man's name, Ryan Williams, age, 34, a personal trainer at Elite Fitness, where they had met 7 years earlier. He was also married to a woman named Emily, who was 32. No children. Emily worked from home as a graphic designer. I asked, my voice distant, if Ryan's wife knew. Donovan shook his head. Not that he could tell. Laura and Ryan were cautious, meeting either at the condo or at places where they wouldn't be spotted by anyone who might recognize them. I flipped through more photos, forcing myself to look. And the money? She was funding their lavish lifestyle. Expensive clothes, gourmet dinners, luxury vacations disguised as wellness retreats or business trips. The condo alone was worth nearly $500,000, with astronomical monthly maintenance fees. But most of the money was tied up in investment accounts, some solely in Laura's name, others co-owned with Williams. At that point, I shut the folder, unable to continue looking. She had been preparing to leave me. I said it aloud, but Donovan responded anyway. Yes, he believed she was simply waiting until the accounts were drained or until she figured out how to access my retirement savings without tipping me off. He paused for a moment. Announcing your retirement probably forced her hand, he said. Of course. She had always delayed my plans to stop working, always finding a reason to push it off. Now, I saw the real motive. Keep the surveillance going, I told him, and dig deeper into Ryan Williams, find out what he's hiding. Donovan raised an eyebrow. You're not thinking of doing something illegal, are you, Mr. Reynolds? I met his gaze, unwavering. I want justice. Another week passed before I confronted Laura. I used the time to move what assets I could and to consult with a divorce lawyer. Pennsylvania follows equitable distribution laws, but proving financial misconduct would be crucial if I hoped to salvage any of our savings. She came home late one Thursday night, smelling of high-end perfume and looking flushed, obviously just back from a night out with her lover. We need to talk, I said, as she set her purse down. Laura sighed, feigning annoyance. Can't this wait until morning? I'm tired. No, it can't. I placed the evidence folder on the counter between us. I know about the money, Laura, and about Ryan. For a moment, her expression didn't change. Then, slowly, her usual mask slipped away, and something cold and detached replaced it, like I was speaking to a stranger. How long have you known? She asked, her voice flat, offering no attempt at denial. Long enough, I answered. She calmly poured herself a glass of water, as if we were discussing mundane matters, not the end of a marriage. I suppose you're angry. The understatement of the year. It almost made me laugh. Angry? You've siphoned nearly $2 million from our retirement to fund your affair, with someone barely older than our son would be. Angry doesn't even begin to describe it. Laura took a deliberate sip of her water, her eyes calculating. What is it you want, Mark? A grand confession? Tears and apologies? Her lip curled slightly. That's never been our way. Our way? We've been married for 25 years. Yes, and for 20 of those years, I've been bored out of my mind. She set her glass down with a sharp tap. Do you know what it's like? Living with your constant caution, your relentless penny pinching, your pathetic dreams of someday going to Paris, always someday, never today. Each word stung like a slap. We were saving for our future, I tried to say. For our retirement. No, Mark. You were focused on accumulating wealth. I was just trying to get by, she said, leaning in, her words sharp with disdain. To you, I was nothing more than an object to fill your paycheck. And now, you're nothing but a burden, she added coldly. I looked at this woman, once my partner, now a complete stranger, and something inside me broke. It wasn't my heart. Not that. No, that had fractured the moment I first saw the bank statements. This was something different, something deeper. Perhaps it was the last remnants of who I had been, a man who believed in trust, who kept his heart open, who acted decently. I want a divorce, I whispered. Her laugh pierced the air, sharp and brittle, like the sound of glass cracking. Naturally you do. You think you'll get everything, don't you? Poor Mark, the noble martyr betrayed by his cunning wife. She shook her head, her tone dripping with mockery. You've never been good at seeing the full picture, Mark. That's why I took charge of our finances. I don't understand, I muttered, bewildered. I've been scheming for years, she confessed, her voice thick with satisfaction. The accounts you found? They're only a small piece of the puzzle. Every transfer, every withdrawal, your signature is all over them. A wave of cold dread washed over me, creeping through my body. That's not possible. I never signed anything, I stammered. Not knowingly, no, she sneered, her smile venomous. But you signed plenty of things without a second thought. Insurance papers, tax documents, power of attorney forms. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. You forged my signature. Prove it, she dared. Then, grabbing her purse, she added, I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. Have your stuff packed by the weekend. As she made her way to the door, I finally managed to speak. You won't get away with this, Laura. She paused just long enough to glance back at me, a look of pity in her eyes. I already have. 25 years of my life, my trust, my savings, had been ripped away in an instant. And there was nothing I could do to change it. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone in what I now saw wasn't our home at all. That night, I was consumed by a fog of anger and despair, pacing back and forth, then freezing in moments of numbness. But by morning, something within me had solidified, a cold, clear determination. Laura had thought she had destroyed me. She expected me to fall apart, shame to swallow me whole while she and her lover reveled in their betrayal. She always saw me as the predictable one, the cautious one, the man who would never fight back. It was time to show her just how wrong she was. I called in sick to work and spent the day compiling a list of everyone who knew us as a couple. Neighbors, co-workers, friends, even people from our church. Then I began calling them one by one. I'm not sure what to do, I told our next-door neighbor, my voice carefully tinged with embarrassment and just the right hint of distress. The debts? They're just piling up. Debts? What debts? Martha Simmons asked, her surprise genuine. She had known us for 15 years and had never heard of any financial troubles, because until now, there were none. It's difficult to talk about, I said, letting my voice crack just enough to sound vulnerable. Some bad investments, maybe a gambling issue I couldn't control. We're headed for bankruptcy, and Laura, I paused for effect. She's sticking by me, but this isn't the life she signed up for. Over the next few days, similar conversations played out. To some, I hinted at gambling problems. To others, I spoke of risky investments or mounting medical bills. The stories weren't the same, but they shared a common thread. I had secretly ruined us financially, and Laura was the devoted wife trying to hold it together. As I had planned, the rumors spread like wildfire. I made sure to be seen looking unkempt at the grocery store, overheard canceling our country club membership because of unforeseen financial hardship, and even got caught browsing job listings for positions with lower pay. Meanwhile, I was working behind the scenes. At my lawyer's suggestion, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find related to Laura's affair and theft. I froze the accounts I still controlled and changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance, from Laura to my sister. 9 days after Laura left, I reached out to Ryan Williams' wife. When Emily Williams opened the door, she looked at me warily, as if she could sense the upheaval in her own life. She was younger than I had expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled into a ponytail and a natural beauty that didn't rely on any enhancements. "Mr. Reynolds?" she asked, her voice tight with tension. I nodded. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mrs. Williams." "Emily, please," she corrected, stepping aside to let me in. "Let's skip the pleasantries. You said on the phone you had information about my husband and your wife." Their home was modest, a stark contrast to the luxury of the condo where Ryan had met with Laura. I wondered how much Emily knew of her husband's hidden life. I placed my folder on the coffee table. "What has Ryan told you?" Emily's laugh lacked any real joy. "Are you talking about his affair with your wife?" she asked. Her response was an unreadable gaze. "I discovered it 2 weeks ago when I found jewelry receipts I never saw and hotel bookings I was never a part of," she continued, her arms folding in a firm, protective manner. "I confronted him," she said. "He admitted to the affair, but insisted it was nothing serious, just a physical thing that didn't mean anything." She opened a folder and pulled out a set of documents, the condo purchase agreement, signed by both Laura and Ryan. "This," she said, "is more than just physical." Emily's eyes grew wide as she skimmed the document, her face losing all color. "They bought property together?" she asked, disbelief in her voice. "Yes, a high-end downtown condo worth almost $500,000, I replied, "and that's only the beginning." I spread out more papers in front of her, bank statements, investment reports, credit card bills. They've been siphoning money from my retirement accounts for years. "The total amount?" I paused. "Almost $2 million. I watched Emily collapse onto the couch, her hands trembling as she flipped through the evidence. "Ryan said he couldn't help fund my education," I added softly, allowing the weight of the situation to sink in. "There's more. My wife forged my signature on multiple documents," I went on, "including power of attorney forms. She's been selling off our investments and moving the funds into offshore accounts, some of them in her name, others with Ryan's name as well." Emily's face turned an even paler shade. "Is my name on any of this? Could I be implicated legally?" she asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. I shook my head. "Not that I've found, at least not yet. But Ryan's in deep. These transactions are illegal, fraudulent, possibly involving grand theft or money laundering." Emily stood abruptly and began pacing the small living room. "Why are you showing me all this? What do you expect from me?" "I need someone on my side," I said, leaning forward. "They think they've already won. Laura believes I'm finished." I sighed, the weight of the situation heavy on my chest. An old man, defeated, left to beg for whatever scraps she might let fall. She's spreading rumors about me, claiming I'm financially ruined, that I lost our savings to gambling. And you're letting her? I met her eyes. "For now, yes," I replied, "because while she's too focused on enjoying her supposed victory and watching me crumble, she's neglecting the bigger picture. She's blind to the evidence mounting against her. She doesn't see the trap closing in." Emily stopped pacing, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of trap?" she asked, her voice low. "The kind that requires teamwork," I said, motioning to the chair across from me. "How familiar are you with digital forensics, Emily?" A slow, knowing smile formed on her lips. It wasn't warm, but it held an air of quiet satisfaction. "I'm a graphic designer with a background in IT security," she replied. "I know enough." For the first time since I'd discovered Laura's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Then we have a lot of work ahead of us," I said. The next few months were a lesson in meticulous planning and patience, traits I'd always had, but never applied to something so cunning. Laura had always thought of me as simple, predictable, easy to control. But now, that perception worked in my favor. Emily turned out to be more than just a partner in this. She was an unexpected ally. Beneath her quiet exterior lay a sharp intellect and an impressive knack for strategy. While I maintained the facade of a man broken by financial ruin, Emily worked diligently behind the scenes. She tracked Laura and Ryan's movements, documented their illicit dealings, and fortified our case. "They're getting anxious," Emily told me during one of our regular meetings at a cafe several towns away. We'd made it a routine, meeting twice a week in discreet spots, far from the prying eyes of our enemies. "The rumors are starting to have an effect," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. Laura had to move about $300,000 back from their offshore accounts to keep up the illusion. Emily pushed her laptop toward me. "Look at this. Ryan's selling assets, luxury watches, that boat he bought last year. He's liquidating everything quickly." I reviewed the financial records she had compiled. "They're preparing to run," I said, feeling the weight of their impending departure. "They're planning to leave soon," Emily confirmed. "They've been eyeing properties in Costa Rica. No extradition treaty." It was time for phase 2. The plan now was to escalate things, but in a controlled manner. I started making more visible moves, creating the appearance of legal action against Laura. I made sure people saw me consulting with my lawyer in public places. I arranged meetings with forensic accountants, making sure the financial investigation was evident to anyone who cared to notice. The pressure had the desired effect. 2 days later, Laura called. "What do you think you're doing?" she spat, no niceties in her tone. "Hello, Laura. It's nice to hear from you too," I said calmly. "Cut the crap, Mark. I've heard you've been working with forensic accountants. What exactly are you trying to prove?" I kept my voice steady. "Just trying to straighten out my finances. It's been quite a mess, as you well know." "Do you really think you can intimidate me, Laura?" I asked, keeping my tone calm as I paused briefly. "I'm not here to threaten you, just ensuring everything is in order," I continued. "By the way, I've noticed a series of large transfers into our shared accounts recently. Quite generous of you." A tense silence fell between us. "I'm not trying to leave you destitute, Mark. We were married for such a long time," she said, her voice dripping with false concern, making my stomach twist in discomfort. "How thoughtful of you," I replied dryly. "Do you plan to show the same generosity with the remaining retirement funds? The ones in the Cayman account?" I asked, letting the silence hang for a moment longer this time. "I don't know what you're referring to," she responded, but there was no mistaking the strain in her voice. "Of course not," I replied with a faint smile. "Give my regards to Ryan," I added, hanging up the phone. The following day, Laura drained the offshore account, transferring nearly $8,000 to an account that was entirely unknown to me. But Emily had predicted this move, and she had already installed a tracking system on Laura's laptop. Within hours, we had full access to the new account details. "They're accelerating their plans," Emily reported, her voice sharp with urgency. "Based on Ryan's recent purchases, travel adapters, tropical clothing, Spanish language books, they're planning to leave within the next 2 weeks." I nodded, a cold, unsettling calm settling over me. Then we should do the same. The final phase of our strategy required impeccable timing and a touch of theatricality. I arranged a meeting with Laura, using my lawyer to set up what she likely thought would be a settlement discussion. The meeting was to take place in a formal environment, my attorney's conference room, the perfect setting for what she would expect to be my surrender. What she didn't realize was that Emily and I had spent the night preparing the room with my attorney's bemused cooperation. We had set up small cameras to capture every angle of the interaction. The documents were meticulously organized, and at the center of the table sat a sealed envelope, positioned precisely where Laura would sit. She arrived on time, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than an entire month of my salary. Ryan wasn't with her, a calculated risk that had worked in our favor. She walked in alone, exuding confidence, certain that she was in control. "Mark?" She nodded curtly, barely acknowledging me. "Let's get this over with. I have other appointments. Probably in Costa Rica," I mused. "Of course," I said, motioning to the chair. "Please have a seat." James Wilson, my attorney, sat beside me with a neutral expression. "Mrs. Reynolds," he began, his tone flat and professional. "Before we proceed, I must inform you that this meeting is being recorded with my client's consent." Laura raised an eyebrow, but made no protest. "Fine," she replied. "Now, what is this settlement offer I've heard about?" I asked, placing a folder on the table between us. "Inside, you'll find a detailed accounting of our marital assets, including the funds transferred to offshore accounts over the past 6 years." Her expression didn't shift, but I noticed her fingers tightening around her purse. "I've already explained that those transfers were authorized investments," she said smoothly. "Authorized by whom?" I asked quietly. "By you, obviously," she replied with a thin smile. "Your signature is on every document." "Forged signatures," my attorney intervened calmly. Laura's smile didn't falter. "Prove it," she challenged. That was my cue. I pushed the sealed envelope toward her. "This arrived yesterday," I said. "I thought you might want to take a look." Laura eyed the envelope warily, then opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a notarized confession bearing her signature, admitting to embezzling funds from our joint accounts and forging my signature on multiple financial documents. Her face went pale as she read it. This is absurd. I never signed this." "Didn't you?" I leaned in, pointing at the date at the top of the page, March 10th, 5 days before I announced my retirement. "That was the day you asked me to sign those power of attorney forms for the estate planning," I reminded her. "You were in such a hurry that morning, remember?" "3 documents, you said." "But there were 4, I continued. The 4th one was underneath, a blank page with just a signature line, which you quickly skipped past." Laura's hands started to shake. "This won't hold up," she muttered. "I'll deny it." "You can try," my attorney said, his voice firm. "But the forensic document examiner has already confirmed the signature as authentic, and then there's the recording." Laura's head snapped up. "What recording?" she demanded. I motioned to Wilson, who pressed a button on his laptop. A video began playing on the mounted screen. It was a video of Laura and Ryan in their luxury condo talking about their plans. "Once Mark signs those power of attorney forms, we can liquidate the rest of the accounts." Laura's voice rang out, clear and sharp in the high-quality recording. "He never reads what he signs anyway." "What about the signatures on the previous transfers?" Ryan asked, his voice laced with curiosity. Laura's laughter echoed in the room, cold and mocking. "I've been forging his signature for years," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm, "and he still hasn't caught on." I hit the stop button on the video. Laura stood frozen, her face a mix of disbelief and anger. After a long pause, she stammered, "That's illegal. You can't record people without their consent." A calm, steady voice cut through the tension. Emily entered from the next room, cool and composed. "Actually, I can," she replied, her tone firm yet calm. "When the property being discussed is mine." Laura's eyes snapped to Emily, confusion and fury mounting. "Who the hell are you?" Laura demanded. "Emily Williams," Emily answered, her face unyielding. "Ryan's wife." She placed a USB drive on the table, her voice carrying finality. "Co-owner of the condo where this conversation is taking place. The condo bought with money taken from Mark's retirement fund, which is registered under both mine and Ryan's names, something I'm sure he forgot to mention." As the realization hit, Laura's face drained of color. "You've been in on this together from the start," I said, my voice steady and resolute. Tracking every financial move, recording every conversation, building an airtight case against both you and Ryan. I paused for a moment. By the way, Ryan is probably just getting a similar shock right now. 2 detectives and a forensic accountant are currently executing a search warrant at his gym office. In a panic, Laura reached for her purse, likely to call someone, but my lawyer was faster, yanking it out of her reach. "No need for that, Mrs. Reynolds," came a voice from the doorway. Detective Samuels, a tall and broad-shouldered man in his 40s, stepped into the room, flanked by a uniformed officer. "We already have everything we need." Laura's eyes flicked between us, her frantic calculations slowly turning into fear. "This is a setup," she spat. "That's not what the evidence shows," Detective Samuels responded, his tone sharp and professional. "Laura Reynolds, you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy to commit grand theft. You have the right to remain silent." As Samuels continued reading her rights, Laura's gaze locked with mine. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. It brought me a small sense of satisfaction, a glimmer of comfort. She would now understand the true weight of the pain she had caused. As the officer began to escort her out, she shot one last look at Emily, who stood by my side, no longer an adversary, but a partner in revealing the betrayal. Not lovers, as Laura might have believed, but united in a shared commitment to justice. Before she was led away, Emily allowed herself a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. It was a quiet acknowledgement between us, something beyond simple revenge, a gesture that hinted at something deeper, something Laura would never have predicted. 6 months later, I sat on a charming cafe terrace in Positano, gazing at the sunset as it dipped below the Mediterranean horizon. The view was everything I had dreamed of during all those years of saving and planning. The azure sea stretched endlessly, the pastel-colored buildings clung to the cliffs, and the air was thick with the scent of lemons and salt. "It's stunning, isn't it?" Emily said, placing 2 glasses of wine on the table before sitting across from me. I smiled and nodded. Totally worth the wait. Laura had been sentenced to 8 years for financial fraud, with an additional 2 years for conspiracy. Ryan's sentence was somewhat lighter due to his cooperation, although his testimony was rendered unnecessary by the overwhelming evidence Emily and I had gathered. The legal battle had been long and grueling, but ultimately it was all worth it. With the help of the forensic accountant, we managed to recover nearly 70% of the stolen funds, enough to allow me to finally step into the retirement I had spent so many years working toward. As for Emily, she used her share of the recovered money to return to school and pursue her degree in digital forensics, something she had always dreamed of. What began as a bond forged in shared trauma had blossomed into a real friendship, grounded in respect and mutual understanding. When I mentioned my plans to take a long-awaited Mediterranean trip, Emily surprised me by offering to join me as a travel companion. Separate rooms, separate expenses, and she would photograph the journey for her portfolio. After some thought, I agreed. Her company had become an unexpected gift in this entire ordeal. Nothing romantic, but something far more valuable. A true friendship, forged through fire. "I got a call from my lawyer this morning," I said, sipping my wine. "The sale of the condo is finally complete." Emily nodded. "Good. Another loose end tied up." "Not quite," I replied, pulling a small flash drive from my pocket and sliding it across the table. Emily's eyes widened slightly as she recognized it. "You kept it? I thought we agreed to destroy all copies after the trial." "I kept one," I said, holding her gaze. "Just in case," I added. She turned the drive over in her fingers, her expression unreadable. "In case of what?" "Not what," I corrected. "In case of who?" Understanding flickered across her face. "You think Ryan might come after us for revenge when he gets out?" I shrugged. 6 years is a long time to nurse a grudge, but not long enough to forget it. Emily slid the drive into her pocket with a nod. Better safe than sorry. We fell into a comfortable silence, watching the sky transform from gold to deep purple. After a while, Emily broke the stillness with a soft question. Do you ever regret how everything turned out? It wasn't about Laura and Ryan. Their fates were the consequences of their actions. What truly mattered was everything surrounding them. The marriage, the years spent holding on to a relationship that was never real to begin with. This thought had been a constant companion in my mind for months now. At last, I spoke. I've come to terms with it, I said. Laura was right about one thing. I spent so much time being overly cautious, always looking ahead, thinking about the future instead of truly living in the moment. I don't regret the effort I put in, but I do regret not taking more time to enjoy the journey. Emily listened intently, her eyes soft with empathy. And now? She asked, her curiosity clear in her voice. I waved a hand toward the breathtaking view in front of us. Now I'm making up for lost time. Emily raised her glass, offering a quiet smile. To making up for lost time, she said. I tapped my glass against hers, a smile of my own forming. And to unexpected partnerships, I added, and we both took a drink. At that moment, my phone buzzed with a new message. I glanced at it, then set it back down. Is it something important? Emily inquired. Just a confirmation, I answered. Remember the investment opportunity I mentioned? The one Laura never knew about? Her interest piqued. Emily's eyes lit up. The tech startup? The one you invested in just before meeting her? I nodded. They've gone public. The shares I've held for 27 years are now worth... I named a figure, and Emily's eyes grew wide. My God, Mark! That's more than what Laura took, isn't it? I nodded quietly. A lot more. She stared at me in disbelief. You knew. Even while playing the part of the broke, bankrupt husband, you knew you had this waiting. I suspected, I corrected her. The company was thriving, but the IPO wasn't a guaranteed thing. I didn't want to put all my faith in it. Does Laura know? I shook my head. That account was set up long before we met. It was never part of our joint assets. Her name's not on any of the paperwork. A slow, mischievous grin spread across Emily's face, the same one I had seen the day Laura was arrested. So, while she's sitting in prison with nothing, you're richer than ever. I nodded. Ironic, isn't it? Emily's laughter rang out, bright and unburdened. What are you going to do with all that money? I turned my gaze toward the darkening sea, the horizon stretching out before me, filled with possibilities. Live well, travel more, maybe even start a foundation to help those who've fallen prey to financial fraud. I didn't mention the other plans swirling in my mind, the ones connected to the flash drive Emily had in her bag and the information my private investigator had gathered. Some things were better left unsaid for now, just like the hidden investment. After all, Ryan Williams would eventually be freed, and while I was no longer the cautious, predictable man that Laura had easily manipulated, I still believed in being prepared. I refilled our glasses. Another toast? To the future, Emily said, her smile still playing at the corners of her lips. And to justice, I added, the kind that comes from courtrooms and the kind that comes from somewhere else. Our glasses clinked together, the sound echoing through the evening air. Some debts could never be settled through legal means, but that would be a problem for another time. Tonight, I would savor the view I had waited 25 years to witness, and the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing that sometimes justice finds its way in the most unexpected of forms. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.